Hi everyone, welcome back. In 1928, at St. Mary's Hospital in London, a discovery was accidentally made that would change medicine forever. Dr. Alexander Fleming at the time was studying Staphylococcus bacteria, and one day he and his lab assistants left on a prolonged vacation. When they left, his lab assistants accidentally left a few cultures uncovered with the lids off. And when they returned, they found that a wild mold had colonized some of these plates and had begun to grow on them. And a curious observation was made. A large empty space separated the mold from the bacteria that had previously existed on that plate. And the bacteria that was on that plate, in that space, seemed to have been killed or inhibited. Now that mystery mold was Penicillium chrysogenum, an ascomycete fungus that's a pretty common bread mold species. Now, Fleming discovered the bacteria truly died in the presence of this fungus. The colonies that existed in that space had become inert and translucent and had ceased to function. Eventually, he and other researchers were able to extract and isolate that active agent that seemed to cause the bacteria to die, a compound that came to be known as penicillin. Now, penicillin was the first of many modern antibiotics that was discovered at this time, and it became the first effective treatment for major bacterial diseases. Now, of course, what we're talking about here is an antibiotic. And antibiotics are compounds with qualities that kill or inhibit various forms of life. Predominantly, when we talk about antibiotics, we're really discussing antimicrobials, as in compounds that kill microbial life. And antibiotics can come in a lot of different forms. You could have antibacterials, antifungals, antivirals, antiparasitics, antiprotozoals. Each of these target specific groups. Antibacterials attack bacteria, antifungals to fungi, antivirals to viruses, antiparasitics to animal and protozoan parasites, and antiprotozoals attack specifically protozoans. Now, there's a lot of different kinds of antibiotics, a pretty diverse collection of these compounds that exist. Now, we tend to think of Fleming's penicillin as our true first antibiotic, but that's actually not true. We've used antibiotics in different forms for ages, even when we didn't really know that's what they were doing or effectively how the antibiotic was working. Various forms of mold throughout history have been common sources of antibiotics, and several species we often find on bread and other kinds of foods, and people have taken them historically orally or used them topically on injuries. They were used to prevent or fight infection. And people have done this in various cultures for centuries, millennia really, before the discovery of penicillin. Penicillin really marks the first time that we've discovered a natural antibiotic chemical, identified it, and figured out that the natural chemical property of that molecule is antibiotic in nature. Fungi aren't the only organisms that make antibiotics, however. Bacteria can too. So this is an example here. This is a bacillus species that is producing some kind of antibiotic in this vicinity, and it's actually killing the mold that it's growing with. So this is a fungal colony that inhabits this entire plate, and the bacterium is growing here, and there's a large zone of inhibition that is killing all the fungus in this area and keeping it from growing. Now, why do antibiotics exist? This is a pretty important question because it's not like these bacteria and fungi make these compounds for our sake. It's all about competition, it turns out. Despite being very small, microorganisms still have to compete and share with other microscopic organisms for their environment. There are limited resources where they grow. There's limited food, water, space, specific nutrients, and microbes compete with one another for access to those resources all the time. Antibiotics are really just a tool that they use to fight one another indirectly. It is part of their competitive nature. So this competition, ultimately, it shapes the community's composition, where species live and who they can live with, which species can exist together, which ones cannot, who can inhabit a shared space. Consider the human microbiome. Here, bacterial cells outnumber human body cells. More than 50% of the human body is made up of bacterial cells. even though the bacteria only make up about 0.3% of our body weight. The bacteria that live in our body, they're surprisingly diverse. They're really abundant, and there are a number of different species that inhabit various parts of the body. Everywhere that they occur, there is a high degree of competition for space in these areas. And space is the decider. Species that cannot cut out a space for themselves in or on the human body cannot survive in or on it. And microorganisms ultimately have to defend their home turf once they establish that space. They have to be able to hold it and prevent other organisms from displacing them. That's where antibiotics come in. These antibiotic chemicals are secreted by the bacteria and other organisms to inhibit the growth of potential competitors in their environment. This is particularly useful for us as well, for the organisms that live in our body, because when they make these antibiotic compounds, it also means that hopeful pathogens that would normally try to live in our body oftentimes can't survive that exposure. Foreign occupants, other species that don't usually exist here and are trying to establish a new home, struggle to make that happen. They struggle to lay down roots. Now, bacteria that live in your body are selfish when they defend it. They are not fighting for you against these pathogens. They're fighting for themselves. It's their home. So when they make various compounds to deter other organisms from growing here, it's really about protecting their home and eliminating their potential competitors. Microbes across the diversity of life produce different kinds of antibiotic compounds. Some of these compounds we can actually use ourselves. There are a lot of notable antibiotics from bacteria too. So we have streptomycin, produced from various Streptomyces species, bacitracin from Bacillus species, particularly Bacillus subtilis. And then we have tetracycline as well. It comes from a variety of different soil bacteria. This kind of microscopic chemical warfare that takes place in our body, in our microbiome, makes this community of bacteria a really effective line of defense against potential pathogens. It helps protect our body from things that would otherwise colonize us and cause disease. So a healthy microbiome, one that is very diverse and has a lot of different, well-established bacteria that have a positive relationship with the human body, can help deter negative bacteria from colonizing. It's actually a pretty key part of our defense against invaders. It's part of our immune system in a way.